So the title of our presentation is 100 Hours and $100,000. How to use short-term rentals to transform your finances in 1 year.
And a lot of these pictures actually that we're going to put in here are pictures from our own portfolio or people in our community's portfolio. So this is actually our short-term rental in Dallas, one of our professional pictures, right, for the listing. So
yeah, and we will explain what 100 hours and $100,000 means shortly. Okay, let's start out by this is our standard disclaimer, and so if you want to take the time to read this, this is also being recorded, so you can watch this in replay.
Basically, we're not CPAs, we're not accountants, we're doctors who love real estate, and a lot of the stuff we've done ourselves. But if you want to make decisions, you should definitely talk to financial advisors and professionals who really know what they're doing.
All right.
So one of the questions a lot of you probably have out there is, why is everyone buying short-term rentals? Because short-term rentals are pretty hot, especially in the physician community, the high-income professional community. There's a lot of benefits of them. So I'm sure a lot of you have been hearing about short-term rentals. And so in this masterclass, we're really going to show you why short-term rentals are so popular and how you can use short-term rentals to transform your finances in just 1 year.
All right, let's cover what you're going to learn in this masterclass. The first one is that how one short-term rental can generate significant income. The second thing we're going to cover is how to use short-term rentals to save on taxes without cutting back at your day job. Then we're going to talk about the top 3 mistakes that we see short-term rental owners make and how you can avoid them. And then finally, how to instantly boost the value of your short-term rental. All right, let's dive into the first one.
So here's a little bit about us. Kenji and I are both hospitalists by training. I'm family medicine trained and he's internal medicine trained. We achieved financial freedom with real estate in 3 years. And we probably got into real estate for a lot of the reasons you guys are interested in it. We just felt overworked and we're scheduling time together really far out in advance and just realized that we didn't want to live week on, week off for the rest of our lives. And so we realized we needed another source of income. And for us, real estate was the clear winner in terms of getting cash flow and having other benefits. So we started investing together in 2015 with small duplexes and a fourplex. And then in 2001, actually, Kenji had started investing in real estate. We'd started investing together in 2015. We currently own greater than 150 units, plus we're general partners on an additional 424 units in multiple states and multiple markets. We have broad experience with long-term rentals, short-term rentals. We have a commercial property, and then again, we're in multiple markets. We've taught over 3,000 students to invest in long and short-term rentals. And real estate gave us a life that we were dreaming of when we first started this together in 2015. And we feel really passionate about the subject. You'll see that we're really excited about short-term rentals and long-term rentals and real estate in general. And so we really love sharing that with the community because we know there's a different way than just working for the rest of your life, working ridiculously hard. And so we want to be out there telling everyone about it.
All right, let's dive into how one short-term rental can generate significant income. So there's a myth out there where people think that they need a large portfolio of rental properties to generate enough cash flow to make a difference in their lives. But this is just a myth. The truth is, even one profitable short-term rental can generate enough cash flow to make a significant difference. So before we dive into some examples, we want to share with you why cash flow can be really significant. But even before that, we got to define what cash flow is, because some of you guys might be wondering, well, what exactly is cash flow relative to all these other terms that you hear about? Well, cash flow is the money that you put in your pocket each month after you pay for all your expenses. And we're talking about all the expenses like property management, utilities, your mortgage payment. And after all that, this is the amount of money that goes into your bank account. And this is the money that you can spend.
And cash flow is really important. And we figured this out in 2015 because it's what you can live on, right? Every month you get your income from your job and you need money to be able to live on. You don't just need money in your 401k that you can't live on until you're 65. And so cash flow, if you have cash flow from your properties, that's money coming in every single month. You can pay the bills with it. And it really allows you to work in medicine or your day job on your own terms. So how do you predict cash flow? Well, one of the main tools that we use as real estate investors is called a cash and cash return calculator. And this is an example of our short-term rental cash and cash calculator that Kenji actually built. And what it allows you to do is really predict how a property is going to perform before you even buy it. And so it has a lot of the variables you need to know ahead of time to know how much money this property is going to make you. And so there are two really important areas to pay attention to. The green one is the cash and cash return. That's really how much return you're going to get on this property based on how much you're putting in. So if you put in $100,000 in the down payment and maybe you do a little rehab and that's your $100,000 that you put into that property, if you had 10% cash and cash return, then you're going to make $10,000 a year of cash flow after you've paid all those expenses. The other place you want to pay attention is your cash flow. That's over in the corner. That's 82,000 over here. And that's how much money you're putting in your pocket at the end of the year, if the property performs as well as you think it's going to. And one of the keys is having all the right team members in place to be able to get great variables, because if you have garbage in, you're going to get garbage out and you're not going to be able to predict how the property is going to perform. But if you have the right team members and you go and you get the data, what is the average daily rate, and you get accurate numbers, you're going to know ahead of time before you even buy that property how it should perform. And you have security in knowing that you're buying a good deal from the outset, not buying a deal that's not going to make you money. And so we talked about cash flow. Things that make cash flow are assets. Things that you have to pay out to support month after month or that are neutral, those are called liabilities. They cost you to support them.
Yeah, and the idea is that you want to accumulate assets and minimize your liabilities. All right, let's show you an example of someone who in our community who created life-changing cash flow. And this is Elisa, and she's a full-time GI doctor. She's also medical director of an IBD center, and she has multiple other job titles and things that she's involved in. But over the last 2 years, she's acquired 6 short-term rentals, and combined, they will generate multiple 6 figures of cash flow. And this is not an insignificant amount of money. And when we say multiple 6 figures, we're talking about a large sum of money. And what's remarkable about her, and one of the reasons why she's able to cash flow so much, is that she's self-managing all these properties. She does not have the property management expense. And you would think, like, well, being a full-time GI doc with also medical director of an IBD center, how does she have the time to do it? But she's able to do it by creating the right systems and processes in order to allow her to manage these properties on her own. And again, these are all remote. They're not like right around the corner. These are all in different states. And it's just a remarkable thing that she's able to do this despite having that full-time job. All right, so let's jump to the next one, which is how to save on taxes using short-term rentals. And the real key here is without cutting back at your day job, because for some of you who know about real estate professional status, that's the status where you do need to cut back on your day job in order to get that benefit, in order to qualify for that. But with short-term rentals, you can continue to work full-time at your day job. You don't have to cut back, and you can still get the tax benefits.
So one of the myths is it's only worth investing in real estate if I'm an active investor spending more time in real estate than my day job. And this really is pulled from that real estate professional status which relates to long-term rentals and does mean that you have to work more in real estate than you do on your day job. But the truth is with short-term rentals, you can actually get significant tax benefits without having to cut back at work. And now we're going to show you how.
All right, well, before we kind of talk about the specific short-term rental tax benefit that we were just talking about, we wanted to just talk about the tax benefits for real estate investors in general, because there are a lot. Because we get this question very often from people who say, well, if I can't get that real estate professional status, or if I can't shelter my income with short-term rentals, is it worth it to invest in real estate? And the answer is yes, because there's so many unique tax benefits for real estate investors, even if you aren't if you don't have that short-term rental tax benefit or a real estate professional. And so the first thing is that the cash flow you get from your property is generally sheltered from taxes, which means that you're paying a lower rate, sometimes 0% on the cash flow in terms of tax rate. And then when you combine that with your salary, your blended rate is going to be that you're going to be paying a lower average tax rate. And so you can actually just lower your effective tax rate overall by investing in rental properties and getting that tax-free cash flow. The other thing is that any excess losses that you get after you shelter the cash flow, sometimes you can have excess losses. These losses they don't go away. You can still use them. You may not be able to use them to shelter your income, but they can actually shelter passive income. Or if you don't use them, they carry forward until some point when you sell.
Yeah, and then you can use it to help shelter some of the gains that you have from your property. And I also wanted to just point out that, how can you, we were talking about losses. Am I losing money on the property? And I just want to clarify, no, you are not losing money on the property. You are cash flowing on the property. You're making money on your property, but the losses are phantom losses or paper losses. That's another way to say it. And what that is it's often depreciation or rehab costs that you're writing off of the property that aren't actually really costs. When you rehab a property, it's actually gaining in value, right? And when you do depreciation, it's the government sees your property as losing value every year. Your building is losing value every year. Your building might be increasing in value every year, but you have these losses that the government allows you to write off your taxes. So you're making money, but it looks like on your taxes that you're losing money.
And then another unique benefit for real estate investors is that you can do something called a 1031 exchange, where you sell a property and you can take all that gain and you can put it into another property tax deferred, meaning that you don't pay taxes on that gain right when you sell. You defer that until someday in the future, maybe never, right? If you never sell, if you're always 1031ing, then you can defer those taxes all the way until you die.
And I just want to point out, this is one of our other short-term rentals. This is a property, a cabin we own up in near Seattle, Washington. It's in a little town called Index. And I bring this up because I wanted to also talk about some of the tax benefits of this property. We're about to talk about how you make your losses active, but this property actually sheltered almost $300,000 of our income from taxes, just using this property and using things like depreciation and writing off furniture and writing off our rehab costs in the first year. And so that's a significant amount of money we're talking about here in tax savings.
All right, so now let's talk about the additional tax benefits for when you're active. And this is, again, real estate professional status, or if you have the short-term rental tax loophole. And so with this benefit, in the first year, you can use something called bonus depreciation to shelter not just the cash flow, but also anything left over you can use to shelter your W-2 or 1099 income. And the way you become active is you do something called material participation. And we can talk more about that when we get to the Q&A. But bottom line is that you're really actively involved in your rental. You are involved in the operations. You don't have somebody else doing the day-to-day work. And that's the idea with material participation.
And I know that this question is going to come up because we already saw kind of the inkling of it in the chat, but the most common loophole that we're using with the short-term rental tax loophole is people are using with one property, they're using 100 hours and more than anyone else in the calendar year with one property, or they're buying multiple short-term rentals and they're doing 500 hours across the year, and they don't have to do more than anyone else. They're just doing 500 hours.
And the other important thing to note here is that if you invest in long-term rentals and short-term rentals, you can access both tax loopholes. In other words, for me, I was real estate professional for a long time, and I've been doing it every year for the last 7 years. And when we bought these short-term rentals, I also claimed the short-term rental tax loophole as well. So I did both. And that's the cool thing, is that you have access to both. It's not one or the other. Okay. All right, so let's talk about some of these requirements, and we've touched on some of these already. But the first requirement to access this short-term rental tax loophole is that you have to actually own the property. And you might have heard of things like co-hosting or rental arbitrage. If you don't know what these terms mean, bottom line is that you don't own the property. You're essentially either a property manager and you're managing somebody else's property, and you don't actually own it. You're just leasing it in one case. In another case, you're just being a property manager, and you don't get the benefit unless you own it.
The second requirement we actually didn't put up here, but it's that it should be a short-term rental. Long-term rental is average length of stay of 8 days or above in the calendar year. So even if you have a midterm rental that you're renting out to traveling nurses and they're staying for 30 or 60 days, that's considered a long-term rental. A short-term rental is average length of stay of 7 days or less in the calendar year. So in order to access this IRS benefit, this tax benefit, you really need to be watching your length of stay and make sure it's 7 days or less across the calendar year.
So now the third thing is that you need to materially participate. And what you need to know is that there are 7 different tests for material participation, but you only have to meet one of them. And the one that most people use is this 100 hours and more than anyone else that Leti was talking about earlier.
In the calendar year.
In the calendar year. And the other one is 500 hours. And so you could do either, but a lot of people with their first short-term rental will choose this 100 hours and more than anyone else. And the other important thing to note is that material participation can be shared with a spouse. So in other words, Leti can do 50 and I can do 50. And total, it's 100 hours. Okay, and you might be wondering, well, why is this so important? Well, this is critically important because your tax bill is your single largest expense line item every year. It's going to be more than your mortgage, more than the amount of money that you pay for food. Again, it's your largest expense. And if you can eliminate your largest expense, you can grow your wealth exponentially. And this chart illustrates what happens to a dollar if a dollar doubles every year, tax-free, that's on the left, versus that dollar doubling and you're paying taxes of 33% every year. And when you do that, when you compare the two, growing your wealth tax-free grows your wealth to over $1 million. Whereas if you're taxed along the way, it's $28,000.
And this is why so many of us 1031 exchange too, when we're turning over our properties, because we want to defer taxes as long as we can, ideally indefinitely, right? And pass it down to our children and have them not have to pay those. But every time you're deferring, you're able to take all that money and put it into your next property and be that much more efficient and make that much more cash flow on the taxes you didn't have to pay. So it's really a big deal that real estate is so tax privileged, I would say, of all the different modalities of investing.
All right, let's share an example of somebody in our community who's saving on taxes. And Christina is a part-time ER doctor. She's now part-time. She was full-time when she started the journey, but she's become now part-time. And in the last 2 years, she's become part-time because she's acquired 6 short-term rentals and 16 long-term rental doors in multiple states. And as a result, she's nearing her goal of retiring from medicine. And this quote is great. She said in her first year of investing in short-term rentals, she was able to shelter not just her current year income, but also the following year. In other words, she had so many losses that she was able to shelter what she made that first year, but also anything that she didn't use was carried forward to the next year, and she was able to use it to shelter the next year's income.
Yeah, and why also we wanted to put this example in here is Christina actually claimed real estate professional and she used the short-term rental tax loophole. And so she bought both types of properties and was actually able to access both tax loopholes in a single year.
All right, let's cover the top 3 mistakes short-term rental owners make and how to avoid them. All right. So the first big mistake is making bad investment decisions, and we see this more time than we would like. But the bottom line is that people are buying bad deals, and part of this is that you don't know. You don't buy properties that cash flow, partly because you don't know how to analyze those deals, or you don't have the right buying criteria. And what that means is that somebody might have told you, okay, you want to get, let's say $300 per door. But for a short-term rental, you might go, is that good or bad? You have no idea unless you hear what other people are doing or hear what's possible. And so we wanted to share this little nugget with you, which is that many in our community aim for greater than 20% cash-on-cash return with property management in place. So regardless of whether or not you're going to get a property manager, they do the calculations with that property management fee in there. And they're making greater than 20%. And so that means that if you invest $100,000, you're going to get more than $20,000 in cash flow per year. Now, imagine if you self-manage, property management typically is 30%. And so potentially you can add another 30,000 to that. So that one property without property management could make you $50,000. And that's kind of the idea, is that people have this very, very high standard of greater than 20% for their properties, because they know it's possible. They see other people do it. And again, because if you don't know these types of things, if you don't know what's possible, then you risk buying a bad deal, because again, you're just buying whatever somebody might have told you, but it's not what's possible. All right, the next thing is not treating your short-term rental as a business. And this one, I think makes a lot of sense. A lot of us who are in the medical field, I know some people here might not be in the medical field, but they likely are not, have not gone to business school, or haven't ever owned a business. And if you haven't, then you don't have that knowledge of how to operate a profitable business. And these are skills that are absolutely essential for short-term rentals. We think of each short-term rental as a mini business. And really, you know, the key with maintaining profitability is that you have to constantly be evaluating and improving. And I think that's what tends to happen with a lot of non-business owners, is that they buy something, they kind of set it and forget it, right? And so they're not constantly improving. They're kind of just leaving it alone and hoping that things are going to continue to be okay. But especially with a short-term rental, I don't know how many of you guys have stayed in a short-term rental, but we've stayed in a lot of short-term rentals. And I would say the majority, 9 times out of 10 or more, they're all run down, and they're beat up, and they're not well maintained, and the experience is terrible. And so that's one of the keys, is you really have to know how to run that business profitably long-term, because it doesn't help to just run it profitably 1 year. You got to know how to run this business on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, and so we're always talking about ways to increase income, decrease expenses, improve our marketing, innovate, and make our property more attractive. And that's what we're doing in our communities, is we're working on always making the performance of our properties better and better over time. Short-term rentals, I think part of the reason they've been so popular is they're kind of relatively new, and a lot of people haven't been in the space who are professional investors who are just taking it to the next level. There's a lot of mom and pop landlords out there, both in long-term rentals and even more so in short-term rentals. And the situation is that the market is changing. And in 5 or 10 years, it's going to be a very different market with a lot of professional investors in this space. And we're seeing that more and more. And so we want to be ahead of the curve. We want to recognize that each property is its own business, and we need to be focused on improving the performance of that business to maximize our profit margin now, but also keep that business healthy for the long term, so that you're not in a situation 5 years from now that your property is not performing very well. You haven't done anything new. You haven't improved it. You haven't made more money along the way, and you're wondering what happened. So we are here, you know, working on making our properties perform even better than at the cash and cash that we buy it at. And then another mistake that we see is people focusing on tax savings, letting the tax tail wag the dog, or personal use. And they're thinking that they're buying an investment property, and they tell themselves a story that, oh, this property is going to appreciate over time, so it's an investment. That's not an investment. That's a liability if it's not making you cash flow. And so we're really focused on cash flow. That cash flow is going to be your buffer for when hard times come, but that cash flow is also what's going to set you free. And then we're focused on profit, and we're focused on increasing our profit over time.
Yeah, and one other thing to note, given the current times, is that recessions what recessions do is they get rid of the weak businesses, right? Those weak businesses don't survive, and that's another reason why it's so important to really know how to treat your short-term rental as a business and make sure that it operates profitably even during those lean times. All right. The third mistake that we see short-term rental owners make is failing to mitigate risk. And so one of the things that if you want to mitigate risk, one of the important things that you will want to do is you want to really have a framework so you can consistently assess the upsides and downsides of investment decisions. And I'd say primarily a downsides, because it's easy for people to think about the upsides. But what we don't diligently do is we don't think through the downsides. And not only that, we don't think through ways to mitigate those downsides and have backup plans, right? So what if this happens? What's my backup plan, right? That's what you always want to be doing when you're thinking about the downsides, is figuring out a backup plan, a way to exit the deal in a way where you're not going to lose money.
Yeah, we're going to talk about forced depreciation next, which is a really great way to mitigate risk and to make sure you have a potential backup plan with selling the property if you need to. But another way that people are doing backup plans in our community is some of them are not buying single family vacation homes in areas where they're only vacationer. Like you might think about with a Airbnb or a vacation rental, they're actually buying duplexes or fourplexes and they're turning them into short-term rentals, but they have that backup plan that the property will do really well as a midterm rental to people who are staying 30, 60, 90 days, or even work as a long-term rental. And you can imagine having those kind of backup plans that gives you all the flexibility. So if things change, like short-term rental regulations change, which has been more and more of an issue for people in our community and for people investing in short-term rentals in general, they have a backup plan of knowing how to get it out if they need to. And then another one is failing to identify blind spots, and that leads to mistakes. And so you can see a lot of blind spots yourself, but it really is helpful to have a community of people who are also in the trenches doing exactly what you're doing, who can see blind spots in your deal and help you see those instead of just doing it alone by yourself, hoping that everything's going to be okay and hoping that you haven't missed anything. Now, one of our mentors, Keith Cunningham, always says, he who has the fewest blind spots always wins, because it stops you from making so many mistakes. And the mistakes are what set you back. Potentially years if you buy a bad deal. And so one of the keys is having a community around you to help you not make those mistakes and to see the blind spots that you're not taking into account.
All right.
So why is this so important? Well, I mentioned if you could eliminate the three biggest financial mistakes of your life, your wealth would be exponentially greater. And if you think back through those mistakes, I bet you could see that yourself. And so what we're trying to do with our community is have people buy great deals, have deals that cash flow, have deals that they're forcing appreciation, they're making a ton of money on, but also that they have thought through risk and that they have set themselves up so that if something happens that's not predictable, that they've actually thought through it and they have a plan in place.
All right, let's talk about number 4, how to instantly boost the value of your short-term rental. And you've already kind of given them a little preview, but let's start out with myth. If I buy real estate, it's going to eventually appreciate.
We call that gambling.
Exactly. Definitely don't want to do that. That is not investing. All right, the truth is, with the right knowledge and skills, you don't have to hope that your property will appreciate. You can reliably make it happen. And this is that forced appreciation Leti was talking about.
So what is forced appreciation? Here's another concept, just like cash flow, that maybe if you're new to real estate, you've never even heard about it. But I want to start out by saying this is the biggest cause of our growth of our wealth. It's not taxes, it's not cash flow, it's actually forced appreciation. So it's really, really, really important. Forced appreciation, when you take the value of the property that you buy and you increase it. And there are a lot of different ways to force appreciation. You can structurally improve the building, like you can add a bedroom, you can add a pool, you can take a garage and convert it into a game room. You can finish out the backyard. There's lots of ways to make your property structurally improve to be worth more. You can also improve the design. So if you buy a property that's stuck in the 70s and you fix up the kitchen and the bathrooms, that's going to be worth more to the next individual. Now, the thing with short-term rentals is a lot of times they are single-family homes, and you're in a vacation area, and so if you're selling to a person who's buying the property as a primary residence, they may not care how much money you're making as a short-term rental with the property. So there are things you can do, like fixing up the kitchen, that a primary residence homemaker will say, hey, this is amazing, and feel really passionate and emotional about the property and maybe pay you more for, because it's got a nicer kitchen, it's got a nicer layout, it's got an extra bathroom, right? But there may be things that you do that makes the property make more money as a short-term rental that has no relationship to what you're able to sell the property at. Sure, it makes you money in the short term when you're operating it as a short-term rental, but it's not going to change the sales price down the road. So that's something like, let's say you have a coffee bar, or you have a pool table, or you have some other feature that is removable potentially, but it's something that people who want short-term or want in their short-term rental, but it's not actually going to change the value of the property down the road. And that's why we added plus minus adding amenities. Now, I think the environment is shifting potentially over time that people will pay more for properties that are run as short-term rentals that produce more money. And this is very much the case with long-term rentals, that the valuation of a long-term rental, let's say you own a 10-plex, if you can make it make more money, it's worth more to the next investor. This is not quite the space with short-term rentals yet, but it may be that down the road that does happen with the environment, especially with more professional investors entering the space. But because a lot of times you're selling your short-term rental to a primary home buyer, what they're going to look at is they're going to say, what did this appraise at? And that appraisal, if it's a single family home, is going to be a comp method, and they're going to be comparing to all the other properties in the market. And when that's the case, sure, it can be making a ton of money as a short-term rental, but if it doesn't appraise that high, you may not get that price if you're selling to a primary home buyer.
But the bottom line is you can force appreciate. You just have to be really thoughtful about it. You have to know who's buying it. And again, like Lacey said, sometimes you can take advantage of the higher income and somebody might pay more for it. But if that's not the case, you just have to know again who your buyer is and adjust. But you can definitely force appreciation with a primary home. Doing some of these things that we listed here.
And this is actually a picture from our Dallas short-term rental, which was beautiful like this already. And we are forcing appreciation by adding a pool in the back. And so, yeah, we're putting in a certain amount of money to make that pool. But then if we had to sell this property to a home buyer, we're confident that we're going to be able to get back that money for the pool as well as make more money on top of that. And then also in the meantime, we're going to make an additional 10 to 15% per night additional in rents as a short-term rental.
All right, so here's an example of forced appreciation. So this is one of our students who purchased this property in the Joshua Tree area for $248,000. And before, it was a very dated looking property. The inside looked similar to the outside. And what they did was they transformed the property completely inside as well as outside. I don't have an outside picture here, but here's a picture of the inside. And you can see that it is a lot more modern. It's furnished very tastefully. And this property appraised for $440,000 just a few months later. So you might be saying, well, what about market appreciation? This is just a few months later. And so there may have been a little bit of market appreciation, but I think this was largely forced appreciation. And what they did was they refinanced. And what they were able to do was pull out their down payment and all the renovation costs. And so they have no money in this property after doing that refinance. And the property still cash flows $30,000 per year. And their first year tax shelter was $100,000. They were able to shelter $100,000 worth of income in that first year.
And so I just wanted to reiterate why forced appreciation is so powerful, because you can take these big step ups in wealth in a matter of months. And this is why we get really, really excited about forced appreciation. This is why you're seeing us. We oftentimes buy properties that need to be fixed up, and we're willing to go through that work of overseeing a rehab because of this forced appreciation. I also want to point out that when you refinance and they took out all their money, they took out the money that they put into it as a down payment as well as the rehab money. Now they take that money and they can use it in the next property. So that money is now working for them in another area. So they now basically have it working in two different spaces. And so that's called the velocity of money, because in real estate, many of us run out of money. We save up, we make our first down payment and we're out of money. And so the next thing you can do is you can, let's say, potentially save up for the next deal. Well, if you do this, if you force appreciation and you can take out all that money from your original property, now you can reuse it somewhere else. And that's how you can grow your portfolio quickly when you don't have a whole lot of money to start out with.
Yeah, I would imagine they probably spent about $75,000 for the down payment and also the maybe $75,000 to $100,000 for the down payment and renovations. But I just imagine putting that same $100,000 into a syndication. That money's tied up for 5 years. You're not going to be able to get that velocity of money. You're not going to be able to reuse that same money in another property. And they were able to do that a couple of months later, take that same $100,000 and invest into a second property.
And so I'm just going to reiterate this title of this presentation, the 100 hours and 100K, the 100 hours reverse to the tax benefit of the tax loophole of 100 hours and more than anyone else for one property. And you can see how they did that with this property. They did the 100 hours and more than anyone else. But also you can see how they made money in multiple different ways, right? They have made money with forced depreciation. They're making money with cash flow, and they're making money with the tax shelter. And what you're not seeing is they're making money because the renters are paying down their mortgage too. And they also made money the day they bought it, which is wrapped up in that forced depreciation. They made money when they bought a really good deal, right?
Yeah.
And so they probably got a discount over
did.
what people in the market would have paid for it. So it's wrapped up in that forced depreciation, is that they made money on day one.
Yeah, the purchase price is already a discount on what the offer price was. So there was immediate appreciation. They forced a couple $100,000 in forced depreciation. They add the cash flow to that, and then add that tax shelter.
And then the renter's paying down the mortgage. So
Mhm.
you make money with real estate a lot of different ways. I think people get really caught up thinking about cash flow and thinking that's the only way you make money, but that is not the case. Okay, so 100 hours and 100K, is it possible for me? Well, I think we've given you multiple examples of how you can buy a profitable short-term rental that can generate tens of thousands in cash flow, both through our own portfolio and then seeing other examples. How you can generate tens of thousands in tax savings while continuing to work full-time, doing that 100 hours and more than anyone else, or you can do 500 hours and buy multiple short-term rentals. How you can force appreciation of your short-term rental by 5 or 6 figures in less than a year. And then how you can avoid mistakes that cost you money along the way, the most common mistakes that we covered that we see people making. So now we want to transition a little bit and talk about how you do it. And we're going to be introducing you to our course, our short-term rental course. It's called Accelerating Wealth. So option number one is you can do it all yourself. You can take the extra time, put in the extra effort, take on the risk with potential for making mistakes. And I will say this is how we started our real estate journey. We did it all ourselves. Our students have blown past us multiple times over now in the speed and the amount of cash flow and forced appreciation that they've done because they had our knowledge to kind of build on. So we started out doing this ourselves. So we're highly focused on option number two, which is follow the proven strategy of what we and our community has done, along with having coaching along the way, having that support along the way, as well as your community. And so Accelerating Wealth is our short-term rental course. It's called Accelerating Wealth Short-Term Rental Blueprint. So in Accelerating Wealth, what we will give you is you'll get not only the knowledge you need, you'll also avoid feeling overwhelmed. So when you go out and do this by yourself, what you'll find is there's a lot of information out there of all the potential things you need to know about short-term rentals, and you can get overwhelmed. And what we really do with our courses, both Zero to Freedom and Accelerating Wealth, is we really try to boil it down to only the things you need to know. We don't want to give you 15 different options. We want to give you the options, the one or two options that the people in our community and that we're using so that you can shortcut and you can save time and you avoid that overwhelm. We also help you save time by helping you build your team. We have a group of agents across the country. We have all the other vendors that you need except property managers and contractors. But even those you can get through our community because there's a community of investors, physicians, doctors, all kinds of high-end professionals investing all across the country, and they share. That is part of our community, is it's about abundance, and we share resources with each other. And so you'll be able to go into some of the groups that are based on state and say, hey, I really need a contractor in this area. Does anyone have a contractor or a cleaner or a property manager? And people will share with you. You'll learn how to predict a property.
They'll share with you in our community,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I wouldn't say all communities out there. And I think that that's one difference, is that, you know, our community is really built on abundance and sharing, because ultimately we know that if you share, then likely you'll get that back at some point. And that's how our communities are built.
We also teach you how to predict how a property will perform before you buy it. You become an expert at using the cash and cash calculator and putting all the variables in and making sure you have the right team members and the right number of team members to help you put in those variables. We help you avoid costly mistakes like buying the wrong property or not having a backup plan, which can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, this is really an investment. Most of the people in our community, if you ask them, will tell you that they have earned multiple times over what they spent on our courses because they avoided mistakes, as well as learned how to negotiate and got good deals and all those other reasons too. But avoiding mistakes is really, really important because that can set you back. You also learn how to grow your portfolio faster by maximizing your cash flow, by forcing appreciation, and then saving on taxes. And when you add all of that up, again, it's about the velocity of money. You want to be in a different situation 5 years from now. It's not like you're doing this to invest in, maybe 30 years from now, you're going to have enough cash flow you can retire on. People in our community, we want fast fire. We're aiming to do this in 5, 10 years. We want to be financially free. And so we're teaching you how to do that. That's the same thing that we did, and the same thing that you've seen many of our students also be able to do. You get support along the way from us, and we also have a community of supported like-minded investors. We also have coaches and we have mentors, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then you learn how to implement the tax saving strategies that save you money each and every year with your rental property portfolio. Okay, so what makes Accelerating Wealth different from every other short-term rental course out there? Because we know you have a lot of options. Well, first of all, it's a proven system that yields results. So we have a combined now 30 years of real estate investing experience, including investing through downturns. Kenji has actually started investing in short-term rentals back in 2008. So
actually earlier. So they were called furnished rentals. And so, yeah, so our first actual short-term rental was 2008. And that was actually the year Airbnb was founded. So we weren't even using Airbnb. But even before that, I was actually at furnished rentals that they were not short-term necessarily, but they were more like midterms. But those terms didn't even exist. But I think more importantly, the downturns is really important because just being able to see and know what happens during those downturns to some of these properties. I mean, I mentioned earlier that what happens during recessions. Well, that information that I shared with you is based on real experience of what happened during that time and seeing what other people were doing and how weak business owners and weak businesses did not survive the recession. And so therefore, it just informed how we want to make sure that when you run your short-term rental business, that you run it profitably. And that's what we go through in the course.
We also use the systems ourselves to buy, launch, and run our short-term rentals. And I should mention, which I forgot to put in here, is actually we built this course with a group. We called them the advisory panel of other students who were actually had their own short-term rentals, had a portfolio, and then some team members of ours. So we had a property manager who ran up to over 50 short-term rentals at a time. So we had all this team around us when we built this course. So it's actually based on the experience of many different people, not just ourselves, who actually own short-term rentals and have overseen running short-term rentals. And our community actually owns several hundred short-term rentals. They're actively buying more. And so this is really a community that you get where the coaches and the mentors, and then later on in our membership site, you'll have hundreds of people around you actively investing in short-term rentals, sharing their knowledge and helping you problem solve, and also looking for your blind spots. You get this coaching and mentorship. So we pay for coaches who have actually built portfolios, short-term rental portfolios of their own, who come into the Facebook community. They answer questions, and they also do open office hours every single week. So you have the opportunity to go in a small group and ask them questions and bring deals to them and have them look at them with you. And so I think that's really unique of having that kind of support in a small group rather than just being in a big group where you just ask questions only in the community. You don't have that one-on-one support. We also have volunteer mentors who are in the trenches with you. These are people who are volunteering their time to come into the Facebook community and answer questions. Our community is one of abundance, and our community is one of contribution. And so we literally have people in our community who want to come into our courses and help other students along the path. And these are people who might be 6 months or a year or 2 years ahead of you, but they're literally showing up to do this for free because they care.
Well, the other important thing about community is that there are a lot of communities out there, but not a lot of them, very few of them are going to be like-minded, right? I mean, if you're a doctor or a high-income professional watching this presentation, I can tell you right now, you're not going to want to just go into any community. You're going to want to go into a community where you have like-minded people, but also the income level is also really important to consider, because people at at the high income level have different needs, different requirements, different issues, different concerns. And you're going to want to be around others who are dealing with the same things. You know, if you're going to start sharing things about your personal finances, you want to make sure that other people around you are in a similar boat, as opposed to somebody who is not. And that's what you get in our community. You have that comfort of being able to share those personal experiences, because again, you have the comfort of knowing that other people around you are in a similar boat.
Yeah, and that's the case for the tax benefits too, is,
Mhm.
you know, if you make under 100,000 a year, there actually are tax benefits that you can access with owning rental properties. But if you're making over 150,000, there's really not much there for you. And so our community is in that boat. And so we're all working on making the best use of the short-term rental tax loophole and real estate professional, because those are the tax benefits available to those of us who are making over 150,000 a year. So after taking Accelerating Wealth, you'll have the knowledge to make well over 100,000 in returns in the first year in form of cash flow, tax savings, forced depreciation, renters paying down your mortgage, and buying good deals. And that's what we call immediate appreciation. So you'll have knowledge how to do all of that. So what are some of the features of Accelerating Wealth? So you get lifetime access. So that means you buy the course now, 3 years from now, you can still access the materials. And in fact, we will have updated it by the time you get to it 3 years from now. So we're continuously updating our materials. And so you will get new versions of the course over time, but you have lifetime access to them. There are 5 pre-recorded modules with 74 total lessons, cover everything from mindset to strategy and the tools you need for short-term rental success.
Yeah, I wanted to add 74 total lessons currently, but one of the things that we have been doing is adding additional lessons or modules as new information comes. The one thing about the short-term rental space is that it is extremely dynamic. There's always new things going on in the industry. So that's the reason why we update the course. And as you said, you're going to have lifetime access. So you're going to get lifetime access to those updates.
However, we're very thoughtful about not just adding more modules and giving you too much information. So it really is a balance for us. So we want to give enough that you have what you need, but you don't have too much to overwhelm you. You get access to our short-term rental blueprints, our worksheets, our other useful downloads. There's mentorship by us. We're in the Facebook community answering questions all the time. We do Q&As every week for you. That's that live weekly Q&As. And then you have 4 experienced short-term rental coaches, and then you have the volunteer mentors, and the open office hours with the coaches as well. You get access to our trusted team of vendors, including residential, commercial lenders, insurance brokers, CPAs. You know, we built our own real estate portfolio, and so we needed all these people. So we've been through a lot of vendors over time and figured out the ones that worked best for us. And then our community, we've been teaching courses for now over 3 years. And so our community has trialed lots of different vendors over the years too. And so we've had the opportunity to turn over and to get really great people who are partnering with our students. You get community support in our Facebook group filled with like-minded doctors, high-income professionals, and then also spouses. We invite spouses to come in for free to share your login, because we really want you on the same page. If your spouse is interested, your spouse doesn't have to be interested in real estate. And we have a lot of people doing this on their own, either because they're single or because their spouse is uninterested or even non-supportive. So you will not be alone if you don't have a spouse joining you. But if you do have a spouse or significant other who wants to also be part of this course, they are welcome to join as well. You get exclusive access to our network of short-term rental agents. We have agents across the United States who our investors work with. And so we make introductions in your market of your choice. And then you have lifetime access to them. So a lot of our students will end up buying a short-term rental, and then 6 months later, they want to go to a different market and they want to diversify their portfolio, and they'll need an intro to an agent in that market. And so you have lifetime access to our agent network. You also have the opportunity to earn up to 5 CME credits. If you have questions about that, check out our landing page for the course and you can learn about that. And then you also have 2 free months in Empire Builders, which is our membership site. Right now, there are over 1,500 people in our membership site, and they're all actively investing. And so basically, I think of this course as about 3 months of support. You have 5 weeks with us in the Facebook community going through the course, and you have an additional 8 weeks with us in Empire Builders, where you can continue to ask questions and get answers. And actually, Empire Builders in a way is even more incredible because there's 1,500 people who have been investing for years, and they're in there and helping each other. So it's a really great opportunity. This is not just a 5-week thing. This is actually much more support than you would imagine.
Yeah, this is 2 months free for anybody who's not a current Empire Builder, right?
That's
So I
right.
just want to make
That's
sure
right.
you understand that. There are some people who are Empire Builders who are going to be taking this course as well. Okay, so just to give you a visual of the training materials, it's accessible on an iPad, computer, iPhone. There's even an app for it, so you can watch it on your phone. This is how a lot of people consume the content. And then this just gives you, again, another visual of its video content. And then there's also a written section below, and there's also downloadables. I don't have the written section and downloadables illustrated here, but you can, again, see the video portion of it as a visual, just to give you a sense of what it looks like.
There's a risk-free guarantee, which is basically if you buy the course and you're not satisfied for whatever reason, you can actually get refund of your payment if you write to us by November 23rd. So basically you have about a month to look at the course. You get the whole course when you buy it. And so you have that chance to really dig in and make sure it's the right fit for you. Of course, refund periods for previous people who are in courses are now closed.
Well, that's important to point out because some people do retake this course, right? And so that's what that's referring to.